This is a scene in our living room. If you look in the little corner of our living room, there's a very famous professional artist, our daughter Ann, and she over the years she's just loved doing sculpture, and she has progressed from doing small sculptures like this that are about the size, not quite of my thumb.
She did those in high school.
She did those in high school, yeah. So she did creche scenes, and this is the collection of creche scenes. So we have Marys and Josephs and baby Jesuses that are about, this big, all over the place. And now she's actually gone into making things that are the size of dogs. So they're very large. And so anyway, this is fun. The reason I bring this up is because we're going to talk about the manger scene today, and a couple of people in the manger scene that they don't really quite fit. It seems like, we get cards through the year. This is a card I just got this week, and I was so happy to get a Christmas card. Yeah. And now you're feeling guilty because you didn't send me one, did you? No, that's not what I'm getting at. But I like Christmas cards for a lot of reasons, but in this particular case, this is fun because of the scene that's on it. So let's take a closer look at the scene that's on it, and there's really nothing surprising about that scene. It's pretty typical. You got all the right characters, right? And you got Mary and Joseph down there, and the baby with sparkle fairy dust over his head, and then you got the shepherds over there, and then you've got it's all the right people. But every time I see a creche scene picture like this, I laugh because one of my favorite stories at Christmas is when they asked a whole bunch of children to draw a creche scene like this. You draw the baby Jesus, and then all of a sudden, as you're doing this, you look on the thing that the child had drawn, and there's something else. There's someone else in the scene in there, right? And so the teacher sees this and says, "Well, I recognize the shepherds. I recognize the wise men and Mary and Joseph. So who's that?" And then the child says, "Well, that's Harold." And well, who's Harold? He's not in the Bible. He's not in the Christmas story. He says, "Well, Harold's angels." Oh, that Harold. Yeah, well. Okay, so he doesn't belong there, but what I'm going to get at today is that there's some other people that don't belong in this picture. It's very odd, and we very seldom challenge it in our thinking. And the people that don't sort of belong there are these guys, the guys with the crowns. I mean, why are they there? Have you ever asked yourself that? This is just odd. And it's amplified by the fact that this entire scene is around the birth of the King of the Jews. So why in the world do we have the birth of the King of the Jews, and we got these three wise men coming from who knows where? I mean, most of the speculations, they come from the Babylonian area. It's current day Iraq, in Iran, down at the top of the Persian Gulf. Why are they there? And what we know is when we study the Bible and we see the narratives that God puts together, nothing is by accident. This is an orchestrated appearing. This is a divine appointment. So the question is, if that's confusing to you, well, then you haven't thought about it enough yet. So we're going to do that today. We're going to think about the wise men and try and figure out why they're even there and what it is that they're adding to the story, because they just really don't fit. The shepherds are there because the angels appeared to them, so then they told them, you'll go find them, right? Mary and Joseph belong there, of course. Jesus belongs there. Wise men from Babylon, from pagan Babylon, from current day Iraq. You got some visitors from Iraq. They're in the birth of Jesus. No. So let's just try and figure it out. Let's take a look. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to cover the whole story. Again, a wonderful picture by Jacques Cousteau, the great oceanographer. No, not Jacques Cousteau. Jacques Tissot. I really like that. So, yeah. Jacques Tissot, who painted scenes from the Bible back in the 19th century. He was a really great painter. He actually lived in Israel for a handful of years and would go to the places where these different scenes in the Bible took place, and they would imagine the people that were there. He would paint them and they would put them in the context. So when you see scenery from Tissot's paintings in the Bible, those are actually paintings of the real scenery that's there. So here's a shot, if you look at it, of the wise men coming into town, and this is exactly what the Judean hills look like around Jerusalem. I mean, they look just like this. That's it perfectly. But that's not a real picture of the wise men. Just to let you know, so, in case you're wondering. So here they come. They're coming into town. Look, in the entirety, everything we know about the wise men is in 12 verses in the beginning of Matthew 2. That's it. 12 whole verses. That's everything we know about the wise men. So I think we should read the 12 verses. And then we'll go from there. Sound good? All those in favor? Here we go. Okay. Now Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Behold, wise men from the east came from Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. So I'm highlighting a handful of words here because these are going to recur a few times. Whenever words recur, you need to kind of hunker down and find out why they're there. This word east up here, it means, well, it means east. But the word is this word. In fact, if you've got any Russian friends, Anatoly. Hey, Anatoly. Well, not quite, but it's Anatole. But that's okay. We can do that. So this Anatole word, it's actually a dual-purpose word. It not only means east. So, like, for instance, if I asked you, where does the sun rise? You'd say, well, in the east. That's where the sun always rises. So it's also a dual-purpose word because it's the same word that's used down here on the bottom when it says the star rose. That word down there is also Anatole. So that's the word. Right. So basically, when they would say, where is the east? They'd say the east is where the sun rises. So that word was a dual-purpose word. Depending on the context of how you use the word, it either meant east or it meant something rising. So in this particular case, it sort of makes sense. Wise men from the east, which is where? That's where the sun rises. They came from where the sun rises. They came asking for the king of the Jews, and they saw his star rise, or they saw his star in the east. Now, if you have different translations in English, it might say one or the other. I think King James, you can check me on that, I think it says, we saw a star rise in the east. Well, it's hard to tell whether you should say rising or just in the east. There's been some problems with people who look at this verse and say, well, if these guys live in the east and they saw the star in the east, then why did they go westward to Israel? So many times modern translators will say, we'll fix that. We'll just translate the second use of Anatole as being rising instead of east because we can't have it in the east. We're going to solve that problem in just a second, so hold on to that. So anyway, that's an Anatole. And this one, star over here, very famous word right here. This is the word, a star. Except you don't say it like that. You don't say a star like someone says, hey, what's that in the sky? Oh, that's a star. No, you don't say that. You have to say it a little differently. You say it more like this guy's last name. Aster, very good. So when I think about the word in Greek for star, it's a star. No, I stare at a stare. It's a stare. So that's a really famous word in Greek. So these are going to recur. They saw a sign in the heavens. They saw a stare. They saw something twinkling in the sky, and they saw it rising in the east. Who knows? But they saw something in the sky, and that's drawn them to come. Okay, let's move on, and we'll continue our narrative in these guys. So, I love this picture. When Herod the king heard this, by the way, if you've ever met Micah Wilder from Adams Road, I think this picture looks like Micah. If Micah's watching this, he's probably going to send me a nasty email. But anyway, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. So why would this be troubling to Herod? Well, because he's the king. So if another guy comes into town claiming to be the king of the same people he's ruling, we're going to have a military battle to see who wins, right? So this is clearly a challenge to his authority. The king of the Jews has been born, and basically, ... Herod, your time is limited. So this is a great challenge. So why are the people messed up? You see it says that? He was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him was troubled. You know that phrase, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy? Well, if Herod ain't happy, no one in Jerusalem's happy. Because Herod was a volatile guy. Herod is already known for killing his own family members, for killing his son, most famously. For killing his family members. So when he got up on the wrong side of the bed, people in his family died. This was Herod. And not only that, if you got in his way in town, you might die as well. So when Herod is deeply troubled, everyone's on pins and needles. What's he going to do? And sure enough, you know the story. Later on, he kills a lot of babies. They have rights to be scared when this guy's troubled. So he gets word of the fact that these guys from who knows where come into town, and they say, we understand the king of the Jews has been born. And he goes, oh, really? So that's why I love the picture. Is that right? Well, tell me more, he's wondering. So they told him, well, he's going to be born in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it's written by the prophet. So they quote the Old Testament for him. And it says back there, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, and from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. It's kind of a loose translation. It's more of a conglomeration of a handful of verses from different places. But that's basically it. So when he asks, where is this king to be, his religious leaders say, oh, that's an easy answer, Bethlehem. It's got to be in Bethlehem. And we saw that last week, the passage to talk about. So now it's funny that this guy, Herod, who is the king of the Jews, is so ill-informed on the Bible, he doesn't know where the king is coming from. But the little trick here is that Herod's not really a Jew. He's an Edomite. He's an outsider. So he's not really well trained in the Bible. So he's got to ask his Bible scholars and say, we got it. It's Bethlehem. Very clearly, it's written in the Minor Prophets. That's where you need to go. So he schemes a little bit, verse 7, and Herod summoned the wise men secretly. Secretly. Why would he do it secretly? And he ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. He's scheming right now. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child, and when you've found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. What a snake. Well, he met with these guys secretly because he didn't want people to know what he was doing in his scheming. And he met with them secretly, and they tell him when the star appeared. And then he says, great, well, when you find the baby, let me know, and I'll join you worshiping this king who's going to challenge my rule. No, never going to happen. That's completely wrong. He's going to do away with this child, right? These guys from the East don't seem to understand the dynamics here. Because as the narrative goes on, it looks like they're willing to go along with this because they're thinking, well, he's hosting us in a foreign land. We come from way over there, and he wants us to inform him where the baby is. We'll go out looking on the hillsides for the baby, and when we find him, we'll invite him in. Because after all, this guy's in charge of the Jews, so he wants to worship too. They're a little clueless until God intervenes, it turns out. Well, that makes sense. I understand why. Okay, so if you move on, verse 9, so after listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Well, now, we have the return of these words again. Here's a stair up there, and behold, the stair, the star that they had seen. And verse 10, and when they saw the stair, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Okay, so they're following this star. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Just put that in your hip pocket. And again, this Anatole, and the star that they had seen when it rose. Now, that's a very interesting phrase. Why not just say this star that they saw? Why would you always say this star when it rose? Isn't that interesting? I go out at night right now, before I go to bed, and I look at the stars. Crazy habits, come around my house around 11 o'clock at night. You'll see me standing out in the street. But anyway, I look at the stars. I love to watch the stars because as the stars gently move their way through the seasons, they tell me something. Like, for instance, did you know you can spot the Big Dipper, right? Maybe? You look toward the north, up the sky. Okay, Big Dipper. The Big Dipper for me is kind of like the hands on a very large clock. So if I look to the north and I look to the pole star, I can see the Big Dipper rotating around the pole star. But what's cool is it's moving around throughout the calendar months of the year so that when you get to the spring equinox, to the summer solstice, to the fall equinox, and the winter solstice, right, all those days, when you get to those, they're at wonderful places on the clock dial. So right now we are right on the edge of going into the winter solstice, and the Big Dipper is exactly at 3 o'clock. If the pole star is the center of your clock, it'll be right there on the right at 3 o'clock. And then if you go out 3 months from now, at the next equinox, the spring equinox, at the same time of night, it'll be up at midnight, pointing down. Ooh. And if you go 3 months after that to the next equinox, boom, you come down, it's at 9 o'clock. And then when you come to the summer solstice, it's down at 6 o'clock. And you almost can't see it because it's so low on the horizon. So I can actually go outside at 11 o'clock at night and tell you roughly what month it is. That's the Boy Scout in me being a little too proud. But this is just a glimpse of what these guys from the East did for a living. because they watched the movement of the stars, and they could tell things from the movement of the stars. Now, before we're going too far, I don't want to talk about this too much, but if you're fascinated with how these guys could look at stars and see things going on, you might want to go back and look at how stars were watched in ancient peoples, because it's quite fascinating. They didn't have TV, so at night, all you could do was watch the stars. And the stars told you an awful lot about the calendar. That's what's really cool about it. And there was the zodiac that's used by astrologers. Well, the zodiac it's a universal idea worldwide. Did you know that? I mean, everyone has their own version of it. And did you know that zodiac means little animals? The actual name of the zodiac is zodiac cycle something. I forget what the second word is. The cycle something means a circle. So the zodiac circle is a circle of little animals. It's a little march of it's a little parade. That's what the zodiac means. And did you know that there's 12 of them? Because when the moon goes around a full circuit, which takes about a month, if you go out the same time and I look up, then the next little animal has come in the same place. And then if you go another circle of the moon and look up at the same time, another little animal has gotten into place. Until you do that 12 times in a year, and you've got the 12 signs of the zodiac. Ooh. Well, like I'm saying, the wise men, they were smarter in this than we were. It's a universal thing in the world. In fact, right now, there is an enormous sign in the heavens going on. Right now, Jupiter and Saturn are coming to a conjunction. In fact, they will be at their closest tomorrow night at sundown. Tomorrow night, what you need to do is, just as the sun's setting right after sundown, look to the southwest. It's the same place that the moon ends up setting in the morning right now. Go to the southwest and look very close to the right, and you'll see Jupiter and Saturn together. It's a conjunction. And people, they're kind of overplaying this a little bit. They're not going to be right on top of each other, but they will be 1/10 of a degree apart. 1/10 of a degree? Well, I can't see that. Well, actually, you can if you got sharp eyes. If you're like me and you take my glasses off, there'll be a conjunction. I won't be able to tell the difference, but they'll be very close together. And this is an important deal, because these guys who came from the east, not only did they watch the regular movement of the stars, but they watched abnormal movements in the stars. Like what? Well, like the planets. The planets are crazy. We talked about these a couple weeks ago, the wandering stars, because the normal stars, they come up, they move, they go down, and they shift a little bit every night, so that as you go around the calendar year, but in relative to each other, they're like that. But planets kind of come up and go, whoo, and they do this thing called retrograde motion. And so the planets were an interesting, what do I want to call them? They're like laser pointers to the wise men. Because as the wise men are looking at this very regular affair of the stars that tell you just like a calendar what time of the year it is and stuff like that, every now and then the planets do weird things. And I say they're laser pointers because in a way they point to the background stars. And especially if they actually get together and do something and then split apart again. And the background stars that this little meeting of the wandering stars have, the background constellation that they're in, tells these guys something very important. The background stars. Because planets can do stuff like this, and they can basically be in any part of the zodiac. By the way, the zodiac is just the constellations that are at the band of the ecliptic, if you know what that means. Anyway, so they would move around. Well, right now, tomorrow, Saturn and Jupiter are going to be doing a conjunction. And if we were wise men, like they were 2,000 years ago, they'd say, this means something. Well, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything, the conjunction, except for what part of the sky the conjunction takes place in. That's an important clue to them about what's going on. I think this conjunction is close to Capricorn. I don't know what that means. But this is how these wise men kind of thought. They would wait for the odd things in the heaven to happen. They'd see where they do this conjunction, and they'd look at what's in the background in terms of the constellations. They go, oh, what does that mean? So many people speculate that these guys, when they were back at home, back in Persia or wherever they were, when they were back there, they saw probably one of these conjunctions going on, and the background constellation behind it was telling them something really important. Do you want to look more into it? Take a look. It's one of my nerdy hobbies I've done for like 50 years, to go check this out. But I'm pretty sure that this is probably what sent them to Israel, because they saw an anomaly in the heavens that was lined up with a constellation that told them a king and a king of Israel was born. So they said, let's go to Israel. Just as an aside, can I get nerdy just for 30 seconds more? Did you know, we're talking about conjunctions of planets, did you know that Jupiter and Saturn had a conjunction around the time of Jesus' birth? But it was odd because it was a triple conjunction. What does that mean? Well, it happened in that calendar year the first time at the end of May. And then it happened again 4 months later in September. And then it happened again 2 months after that in that calendar year. Now, a lot of people speculate that if that was the year that Jesus was born, then the May conjunction might have set them off on their trip to Israel. And then the other two conjunctions, after the planet stopped moving and kind of held in one spot, would signal something else 4 months later and something else 2 months later. So what was that year that triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn happened? 7 BC. Okay, that's a little off the calendar, but that's just too intriguing for words. So anyway, I just want to give you a clue. This is the technical background of these wise men. They can look in the stars, and unlike our present-day astrology, where we try and infer that the heavens have influences on us based on what the stars are doing, that's not what they were doing. They would use it as kind of a means of a telegraph from heaven, that these conjunctions would happen in certain things, and it would tell them something as big as going down based on where they were. So there's ungodly astrology. There's kind of godly astrology. By the way, if you think this is foreign to the Bible, it's not. Read Job. I think it's 38. 39? 38. Job 38. And Job 38, he actually mentions a couple of the constellations. He mentions the Pleiades. He mentions Orion. What? And we're pretty sure one of the words he uses mentions the Big Dipper. Big Dipper, yeah. So it's very interesting. This was a universal, understood across the entire world, cultural way in which heaven, which was metaphorically on the other side of the stars, metaphorically how the heavens communicated to man. And these wise men were guys who knew how to read those signs of the times. I let my nerd hang out. Okay, let's move on. One last word right here is really important. It came to rest over the place where the child was. And that word rest, it just means to stand. So what they're saying is that whatever this thing in the heavens they're watching is, it's standing and it stood still. So the idea for this isn't that this gigantic thing showed light over the manger scene. It could be, we don't know. But in terms of astrology talk in their times, it means that the things that they saw that were moving stopped moving and they stood still. So it could very well be, and this is just another interpretation that's fun to speculate about if you're a nerd, could be that as they traveled out to Bethlehem, the moving stars that were at one time in conjunction were moving again, and by the time they got to Bethlehem, it stopped moving. Could very well be. Okay, so, yeah, I'm letting my nerd hang out. They rejoiced exceedingly. Going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, myrrh. A lot has been said about the gold, the frankincense, and myrrh. I'll say a tiny bit more. Because we can't help ourselves. Gold, you know what gold is. Gold's just it's valuable. Gold always says rare and valuable. Frankincense is like the incense of all incenses. You know, incense you burn and it makes it smell. Growing up in the 60s, we'd walk past head shops in weird cities and you'd smell incense coming out and you go, wow, that's really weird. And it was actually just there to mask the other smells that were illegal, but that's beside the point. But frankincense is the incense of all incenses. It's very rare, hard to find. It's used in the Old Testament many times in sacrifices. So like I think it's the grain sacrifice. You'd bring in grain, barley or wheat, and you'd burn that sacrifice. Well, it doesn't make a very good smell. So you would add frankincense to your grain sacrifice when you'd burn it, and it smells pretty good. As opposed to when you bring in an animal sacrifice and you burn the fat. Ever gone to a barbecue? Yeah, baby, that smells pretty darn good. But grain sacrifice is very boring. So in the Old Testament, you take the grain sacrifice, you'd add frankincense to it so that when it would burn, it says literally, it would make a pleasing aroma to the Lord. So that's what frankincense was. It was added to make that smell. It was incense is what it was. Myrrh is more interesting in many respects because it's a very precious, really rare kind of commodity because everyone knew that it had antiseptic properties. Myrrh has antiseptic properties, and hence, that's why it inevitably got used in embalming bodies, because the bodies would decay slower because of the antiseptic properties of myrrh. It was like our present day, what's a good embalming fluid today? Yeah, formaldehyde. Thank you. Okay, formaldehyde. I remember dissecting frogs in junior high. Yeah, formaldehyde. So it's like the formaldehyde of today, but it smelled a lot better. So it's very antiseptic, but then very commonly used to prepare bodies for burial because it's antiseptic to slow down the decay. So that's myrrh. So you can symbolically take those pieces of facts you know about those things and wonder about the fact that why is it that they brought something of extreme value, something that's very pleasant to smell, and something that keeps things from rotting. Why would you bring that to the King of the Jews? And I'll just leave that to you to wonder about through Christmas, because it's a cool offering. It's a cool offering. Okay, let's move on to the last verse that we have that tells us anything about these guys. So verse 12, so being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. So it seems as though if they hadn't had the dream, they were going to go back to Herod. It seems like. And of course, that would make sense. We're not from around here. And so the guy asked us, when you find him, go back. But no, they were warned in a dream. And the dream said, go another way. Go home another way. Oh, okay. So they went home another way. So that's what they did. Nice close-up on the two toes of every camel. Very nice. Yeah. Okay, so we come back to this again, and we're going to digest this a little bit. So again, here we have the King of the Jews in the center of the scene, and we've got these guys who just seem way out of place. I mean, they're just odd. They shouldn't be there, and neither should I. But it did bring up an interesting idea, which is maybe they need to be there. Okay, hang with me just for a second here. Let's look at some characteristics of these guys. First, they're Gentiles, not Jews. Okay, we'll state the obvious. They were distant strangers. They weren't nearby guys. They weren't like Canaanites who lived in the country. They were from way out, from the uttermost parts of the earth, basically. Distant strangers. They had seen a message from the heavens. Now, you can geek out and nerd out on how the star system worked, but the bottom line is that without this help from heaven, this message from heaven, they wouldn't have done what they did. Okay, so they benefited from this message from the heavens, and then they saw this morning star. That's what they would call it, this new day. And a morning star is always connected with a new day. It's always connected with the idea that as the morning star rose, it signaled the end of night and the beginning of day. And if you know anything about biblical metaphors, then you start to say, wait a second, a morning star? A morning star means the end of an era of darkness and the beginning of an era of light. And it's like a herald in that kind of way. So you knew when you saw the morning star in the morning, which often is Venus, when you saw this morning star in the morning, then you would say, you know what? Night is about to end and the dawn is about to come. The coming defeat of darkness. And interestingly enough, they seem to know that he was the King of Kings and not just the King of Israel. They called him the King of the Jews when they came to Herod, but then they themselves worshipped him. And they themselves paid, I won't call it tithe, but they worshipped him with what they gave to him. In a sense, what they worshipped. They worshipped him. Why would they worship a king who belongs to another country? Unless they understood that this guy was something bigger than just the King of the Jews. He was born as the King of the Jews, but perhaps so much more. And this is what drove them to come and to worship. Because they literally did worship with those gifts. And what they did, again, speaking the obvious, they didn't just note it in the heavens. They actually responded to it. They went looking for him after they were informed about this event from heaven, basically. The worship from them was costly. Those are really expensive things that they brought. I mean, really expensive things. And they returned to their old life a different way. And in a sense, were delivered from evil. Now, I looked at that list, and it hit me in the face, and I took 2 steps back, and I realized that's me. The wise men were in the manger because the wise men are us. We're strangers. We're strangers to the nation of Israel. We live off in distant places, both in geography and in time. We've come from very long distances. We've seen a sign in the heavens, or we've heard a message from the heavens. You've heard a message about who Jesus is. It's been brought to you by divine appointment, and it's been put in front of your face, and God has given you an understanding of who this Jesus is. And then, after all of that, you understand that this coming of this one is like a morning star. He's like the beginning of day when I was in the middle of darkness. Could it very well be, and this happened with me, that in coming to Jesus, it's the end of the night of darkness for me, and it's the beginning of a day of light for me? Is that biblically sound? Oh yeah, that metaphor is used all the time. All the time. Perhaps he is that morning star that does that for me. And then maybe not only just the end of darkness, but maybe even though he's born the King of the Jews, he's my king as well. And if that's the case, am I willing to respond to him? And I responded to him. And I came to him because of who he is. And I brought him costly worship. What was my costly worship? Me. Yeah, me. All of me. All of me. All of the things that I thought were valuable, gold. All the things that I thought God liked about me and was a pleasing smell in his nostrils, frankincense, brought those silly things to him. And all those things I was looking to preserve my life, I brought to him. And basically in that worship of him, like those guys, I said, all these things have no weight measured against what you bring to me. You're the one that brings value to my life, not gold. You're the one that allows me to be pleasing. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Hebrews says that. You're the one that allowed me to. You're the one that brings healing and preservation in my life like myrrh does. And so I lay all that stuff down, and I worship the King of the Jews, who also I've realized is the King of Kings. And he doesn't kick me out of the manger. No one came up to the wise men and said, listen, guys, you don't really belong here. Can you see the shepherds? Can you see the shepherds having had their big thing with the angels out in their field, and they come here and they find the King of the Jews, and then these foreigners come in and they stand in there and they, you guys shouldn't be here. This is a Jewish thing that's going. No one chases these guys out, even though they're way out of place. And with us, when we come to the Lord, he doesn't chase us out, even though we've come from distant places and we're not Jews. And Paul addresses the whole Jewish-Gentile issue through Romans quite well and sees how we're actually grafted into the original plan in the same way that the wise men are grafted into the scene of the birth of the Jews, even though they don't really belong. But they do belong, because in the wise men, we see God saying to all mankind, you have a place here at the birth of Jesus. That's for you. There's a place here for you. He is the King of the Jews, no doubt. And that's true. But he's also the King of Kings. And this was foreshadowed when God said to Abraham that basically out of your lineage will come great blessing to the nations, not just to Israel. And that's why the wise men are there. Delivered from evil. Now, if you think this is a reach, I want you to listen to these words from Isaiah 60. And what I want you to do is find yourself in these words and find the wise men in these words, and you'll realize that they're one and the same. Okay? Watch this now. This is cool. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Every time you see risen in the Old Testament, think of something rising in the heavens, like the morning star or the sun or whatever. Think of that. Think of the dawning of a new day. That's what he's talking about. That's the dawning of a new day. The glory of the Lord has risen upon you, just like a sunrise. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples, but the Lord will arise upon you. Got to get that scene. And his glory will be seen upon you. That means the light will shine on you. And nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Sounds kind of wise manish. Sounds kind of like us in a way. Verse 4, so lift up your eyes all around and see. They all gather together. They come to you. Your son shall come from afar, and your daughters shall be carried on the hip. That's just how you carry them, little babies. 5, then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and exult. Isn't that what the wise men did when they got there? Yeah. Because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you. That's riches in a large sentence. The abundance of the sea shall be turned to you, and the wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you. The young camels of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba shall come. This is like a gigantic airlift on camels coming to the manger scene. That's what it is. Of all the world. They shall bring, oh my gosh, gold and frankincense, and shall bring good news, the praises of the Lord. This is the wise men, and this is you. You're in a place that it seems like I'm out of place, but God says, no, you're right in place. Because I'm expecting, God is saying to the prophet Isaiah, I'm expecting the nations to come from long distances from afar and gather to the birth of the King of the Jews, Jesus himself, for the nations, and to bring sacrifices, which are oddly reminiscent of what those guys brought 2,000 years ago, because there's gold and frankincense. Interesting. By the way, and they shall bring good news. Well, that rings a New Testament bell, doesn't it? Luke 2, the angel said to them, this is to the shepherds, fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for the Jews alone. No, that'll be for all people. Well, wow. Maybe that's why the wise men are in the manger. It's good news for all people. Because he's not just the King of the Jews, he's the King of Kings. And he invites us into his presence. Read Revelation 22.
I almost read that this morning.
Did you almost read that? I, Jesus, this is the very end of Revelation, by the way. After all that crazy stuff in Revelation, this is the closing breath in Revelation. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. So in that sense, what he's saying here in Revelation is that I'm the beginning of the end of darkness. I am the beginning of the daylight. I am the one who's like that morning star. I'm like that. Now, interestingly enough, not to muddy the waters too much, but the phrase morning star is also applied to Satan. What? Because he comes like the Messiah to act like he's going to bring light out of darkness and peace where there's nothing but problems. And when you read through the eschatology of end times and you see the Messiah and you see the Antichrist, you realize the Antichrist, Satan, is actually trying to look like the Messiah. So that's why he'll promote himself as the morning star, the end of darkness, the beginning of light. But then it'll all fall apart. So anyway. The Aster, the bright morning star. How about another one? Zechariah, who's the father of John the Baptist, after he was deaf and dumb for 9 months, when he finally got his tongue back, he said this, 78, because of the tender mercy of our God, whereby the Anatole, the sunrise, shall visit us. Shall visit us. Did you catch that? Sunrise is useless if it doesn't visit you. Right? You don't watch it from afar. You watch it as it comes and it visits light on you. So he says, because of the tender mercy of our God, whereby the sunrise shall visit us from on high to give light to those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. That is absolutely one of my most favorite phrases that pertain to Christmas ever, right there. Because here Zacharias, by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, is telling us what it looks like from heaven, the birth of Jesus. And what it looks like from heaven is a morning star and a sunrise dawning on the darkness of mankind and visiting us, looking in on us, as literally it means, looking in on us with this light. Why? So that it'll visit those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death. And with that light, inform us how to walk in the way of peace. That's what's happening in the manger, this cute little manger scene. Sunrise and Anatole from on high. And 2 Peter 1:19. And we have this prophetic word made fully confirmed, to which you will do well to pay attention as to a lamp shining in a dark place, keeping that light metaphor going, until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts. I get goosebumps. Do you get goosebumps? Until the morning star arises in your hearts. Jesus is that morning star. He's the herald of the brink of a new day. And then he's also the sunrise. He's the Anatole itself. He's the sunrise itself that visits us. And this is what's happening in the manger. And this is somehow connected to the lights that the wise men saw when they did all this. So that what they saw in reality is like a metaphor of what's the larger reality, spiritually, of what's going on. Because what's going on in that manger is the birth of the morning star and the beginning of the dawn of a new day for all mankind, going from darkness to day. Wow. I could keep going. This is a very dominant theme in the Bible. But I think I'm done. And look at that. That's a morning star. Right there. That's a morning star. I'm going to finish with a song. Last week I finished with a song. I'm not going to sing it for you because my voice is kind of wrecked from what we did earlier this morning. But this song I'm going to show you should be in our standard catalog of Christmas songs, and it's not, and I'm bummed because it's not. It was written back in the 19th century by a very unknown songwriter pastor. But what he did was he took these ideas we've just been putting together about the morning star, about the sunrise from on high, about reading the heavens and understanding what God is doing and what he's wound up and made happen today. All these ideas about this dawning of this new day and the end of the day of night, all this kind of stuff he put together, and he wrote a song. I'm just going to read it for you because he captures everything we've been talking about. This is by Reginald Heber. Brightest and best of the sons of the morning, dawn on our darkness and lend us thine aid. Star of the east, the horizon adorning, guide where our infant Redeemer is laid. Cold on his cradle the dewdrops are shining, low lies his head with the beasts of the stall. Angels adore him in slumber reclining, maker and monarch and savior of all. Say, shall we yield him in costly devotion, odors of Edom, offerings divine, gems from the mountain and pearls of the ocean, myrrh from the forest or gold from the mine? Well, vainly we offer each ample oblation, and vainly with gifts would his favor secure. But richer by far is the heart's adoration, and dear to God are the prayers of the poor. And that's what love has done. It's risen in our hearts. He's come, and in this little manger scene that we so trivialize, it seems like, every Christmas. Oh, you've got the baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph. And you got the shepherds. And you got sheep. By the way, that stall is where animals are housed. Ever walked into a barn where animals are housed? You know there's only one clean place in a barn? It's where they eat. Manger. French, manger. Psh, there you go. It's a French manger. Yeah. So this is what God has done for us in the birth of Jesus. It's not just an incidental thing that just happened. And of course we know it's not an incidental thing. But historically, God actually separates the timeline of all humanity, where before this birth is a day of darkness. And at this birth heralds the promise of a day of light. And that's what's happening right here. And symbolically, the wise men saw those lights in the heavens, equated it to who this baby was. and came and worshiped, even though they don't fit. But they did understand they were invited, so they came. We understand in a way we don't fit, but we're invited anyway. And so we come to the manger and we worship the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And we're not out of place, any more out of place than the wise men were. Because we've read the message from the heavens and God says, come and worship. And that's what we do. By the way, before we sing this song, I'm going to pray. And I don't know if you've ever done this. Have you ever just gone to the manger every Christmas? That's what I call going to the manger in prayer. I'm going to do it as we close in prayer. So just follow me. We'll get there. Okay. Father in heaven, this is too much to handle. I mean, it feels bigger than we can kind of get our arms around. And yet, Lord, like those wise men, we were at one time often a very distant land. A distant land both in time and in space, separated from you. And then a tiny piece of truth came our way, clearly came from heaven, telling us about who you are. And we started a long journey, walking away from that place and walking toward you. And as we got close, we weren't exactly sure where that manger was. We weren't exactly sure where that king was laying, waiting for us. But as we got close, others helped us and directed us and guided us. And your word itself guided us to the very last steps to you. And so, Lord, we looked, and there was this dimly lit little place in a very insignificant place, it seemed. And we wondered, would it be out of place for me to come to you? And something told me it wouldn't be out of place. Something told me that you actually invited me here. And so I took those last steps to where you were. And then I realized that your heart's desire is to be with me, to be with us, to live in our midst. But it would take us leaving where we had come from and coming to you, leaving all that other stuff behind, forsaking all those other ways in our life, and to come and to kneel at your feet. And Lord, that's what we've done. And Lord, that's what we do symbolically as we think about this manger. We come and we kneel in a place that is largely stinky and dirty and trampled upon, but there in the midst of all that filth is you, holy, clean, separate, not from this place. And we give to you the sacrifice of ourselves. We're yours. We're yours. And Lord, in those special moments, somehow we also know that we have to go back to where we came from. But in going back to the place we came from, you've instructed us how to go back a different way. Not a way that mingles with evil and sin and decay, but a way that is transformed because you have transformed us. The path looks the same. The people and the place looks the same. But we go back a different way because we're not the same. And so you have us go back to the places where we first heard. And we bring with us a piece of the manger scene. We bring with us a piece of who you are. And then it dawns on us, which is a great pun, that the morning star has arisen in our hearts. And you loved us. And you continue to love us. So Lord, as this Christmas comes and goes, and boy, does this seem to go fast, I pray that through your Spirit, you would take us to the manger, cause us to worship, cause us to wonder about the great mystery, the huge news of the coming of the one who is Emmanuel, God with us, and that you'd cause us anew to kneel and to understand that even though we feel like outsiders, we never were. We are always included in the invitation. And our hearts are desperately wicked, and yet you call us to be in the dirty place with all the other dirty beasts of the stall. And yet there you are, holy, pristine, calling to us, promising to us that in your coming is the end of the night of darkness, the beginning of the daylight in our lives because of you. And that's been true. So Lord, thanks for bringing wise men. Thanks for including us in the story through these wise men. Thanks for bringing them there in such a way that they encourage our hearts that even strangers are welcome in the manger to the birth of the King of the Jews. And we have felt that, and we have experienced that, and we will always eternally be grateful for that. So thanks. Amen.